Right, it's been a very long time since we've chatted to today's guest. Bruce Davidson, welcome back. Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time. And I know it's been a long time coming, and we've been trying to get together to talk a little bit about wrapping up the US Open, especially in these COVID times. And with the French Open currently underway, lots to talk about probably out of the US Open leading into the French Open and possibly into the Aussie Open. But let's dive straight in, do a quick sort of post-event sort of wrap up of the US Open. And I suppose we have to start at the build-up where I think it was June they announced that the US Open was going to take place because it was going to be a spectatorless event. A lot of players concerned about that. I think we had Federer, he pulled out, but he was injured. We had Nadal and many others saying, listen, they were not going to attend. And then on the eve of the event, that positive COVID test, what was it? Benoit Paire testing positive, having to be pulled from his opening match. I mean, that must have been a massive scare, and many tennis lovers thinking, holy heck, this is not going to take place.
Yeah, well, I first of all think that we must put things into perspective. We never expected the world to change as it did.
Yeah.
And tennis as a sport was put in disarray like so many other sports, and the Grand Slams in particular, because they are the big money machines in the game. And obviously nobody expected what happened. We were in Australia, we were playing the Australian Open, we were focusing on big wildfires causing havoc there, but nobody ever thought that we would go into what we have been through. Wimbledon were clever to cancel their event, and we know that they had to cancel their event because the grass court season is such a short season.
Yeah.
And to be fair on the players and to be fair on the tournament, to have players come in and play on the grass unprepared and not being able to play in any warm-up tournaments because the WTA and the ATP were pulling out their tournaments left, right, and center. They just made that collective call to make a historic decision and not have the tournament at all, not postpone it, not have it. They couldn't change it. Grass is a seasonal thing. It can't be played in the winter. It's all those issues. And that is an important point because it caused kind of chaos with the other two slams. The French Open started to panic because they realized that there was a chance that they wouldn't play their tournament because it was so close to Wimbledon. So they automatically moved theirs to this date, which is now late September, early October.
Yeah.
That was a big announcement because it was going to put the US Open into jeopardy because a lot of the players had to make a decision. Do we play clay or do we play hard? Because remember, the clay court season is a long season and its penultimate big event is the French Open. And it's very difficult to switch from the hard court to the clay court. So people like Rafael Nadal, make collective decisions. Do they play in the US Open on the hard and then quickly move across to the clay? And this was going to cause chaos. So within the Grand Slam circle, which is a very close circle, there were big debates on whether the French had made the right decision or not. But let it be. Stacey Alister, the new tournament director, the first US Open woman tournament director, made it very clear she was going to have it. She's new in her job. She's going to make this thing happen, even if it was spectatorless, as you quite rightly said, and it was going to be done in a very unusual circumstance, something the players had never experienced before. What surprised me was that New York was one of the epicenters of the coronavirus in the USA.
Correct.
And I never thought that they would actually play that event because there were just horrific figures coming through from New York in particular. And so I take my hat off to them for pulling it off. But they had to create the bubble. The bubble was an incredible process. They had to choose 2 hotels within a clear radius of the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center. And the rules of the bubble are, as you land in the USA, you get tested, you go into quarantine, you go into the bubble, and you cannot move from the bubble. So you go between hotel and you go between court. You do not go to see sites, you do not go to your favorite restaurants, you move between the two. So that if anybody is detected in all the screening processes between these venues and on the vehicles, etc., it automatically can be shut down straight away. So we know that it was a very difficult process. I was with the South African players before they went to New York, there was a quarantine period insisted by the US government here in South Africa. The poor players were in a quarantine situation at OR Tambo, Jeff Coetzee, Lloyd Harris, Raven Klaasen, his coach. They were all in this incredible quarantine situation. Then they had to get onto a long-haul flight, which wasn't cheap, Mark. The cheapest flight to the USA was going between 35,000 and 38,000 Rand.
Wow.
And normally you can get that same ticket for about 12,000 Rand. So that already hit hard on the pocket. And then they had to fly into New York. The good news about the US Open was they decided to move the Cincinnati Masters to New York so that there was 2 tournaments in one bubble over a 3.5-week period.
Yeah.
And that gave a little bit of hope. It's a pity that the Washington tournament was cancelled beforehand, because it would have been nice to have the 3 tournaments and there would have been a nice hard-court swing. And I think because the Washington tournament was cancelled, a lot of players might have pulled out of the US Open, thinking that now it was too short a period of time. If they were in Europe, why leave Europe? That was now a safe zone into a danger zone, come back to the safe zone for the French Open. It caused quite a lot of scheduling hiccups. But as the boys arrived in New York, they were immediately tested. And they went into quarantine until their tests were positive.
Okay.
And that was a 48-hour period. So they were sitting in a hotel room, not able to communicate with anybody. And this affected a lot of the preparation of the players. Because as the players came out of that quarantine positive, they were moved straight to their hotel. And I'm not talking about any normal hotel, not a 5-star like they were used to. This was an average 3-star hotel. The rooms were smaller. It wasn't easy. And the big factor of the US Open was normally you could take 4 people with you in your entourage. You were only allowed 1.
Yes,
So
wow.
If you had a coach and you had a physio, you only chose 1. If you had a mom or your dad, you only chose 1. If you had a mom, dad, coach, and physio, you only chose 1. And this is where Rafael Nadal thought it was just unfair. He travels with 9 in his entourage. It's a very tight circle, and he just couldn't make it. And that's why they had those big virtual screens after each match where you could go in as a player when you won your match live to your hometown around the world and speak to the people. They arranged it. So it was a lot of expense and a lot of work. They played the US Open. There were a lot of players missing. A lot of players thought it was a farce. Marion Bartoli, the former Wimbledon French Open champion, Wimbledon finalist, said she thought it was a total farce. Whoever wins it, isn't really a US Open champion. But it was a bona fide event, and we knew it was going to be something out of the norm. There were no spectators. Completely bizarre circumstances for the emotional players. I'm talking more the Spanish players.
Yep.
And the South American players who play to the crowds and have a big support there, wasn't there. And I know, for instance, Jeff Coetzee, who coaches the world #1 doubles team of Robert Farah and Jean-Sebastian Cabal from Colombia, defending champions of the US Open. There's no way they were going to win a couple of rounds, he told me, because they didn't have that vibe. And he couldn't create it with the physio, and it wasn't going to work. And he was very right, because I could see the energy of the players and what they were trying to do on court was not there. So, yeah, we had a US Open, and it was minus some big names, but we have a bona fide men's and women's singles champion, a new men's champion, and yeah, I think it worked well. And if if I speak to all my player friends, they all felt that the US Open pulled off a cracker of an event, considering all the circumstances against them.
Bruce, just coming back to something you mentioned there, the reduced or the smaller player entourages. I mean, that was just one of the restrictions that the US Open tournament organizers put in play. I mean, they had limitations on the usage of locker rooms. They had to move training and massage tables, all of that, to outdoor locations. You had reduced capacity in the players' dining room areas. And then obviously certain suites were converted to player lounges to obviously keep the social distancing. And then the bizarre sort of report that I read was that some 40, what do they call them? Social distancing ambassadors were appointed to make sure that personnel and players didn't get too close to one another. So like you said, very, very bizarre Grand Slam taking place. A lot of players experiencing very strange circumstances around the event. You did say that we've got a new men's champion. Obviously, if we look, Dominic Thiem, he ultimately won the tournament. Naomi Osaka won the female or the ladies tournament. If you look back on that tournament now, a US Open, a lot of people saying, yeah, they don't really deserve to have that slam behind their name. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that they do, because there wasn't a restriction to any player entering. It was a decision of a player not to enter.
Okay.
And I must tell you, if you go back to a couple of years ago, there was 2 years, and I can't remember the exact years. I think it was 19, 17, and 18. I don't know. But there were 2 years where 7 of the top 10 men weren't playing the US Open. Nothing was said then. Okay, we had Marin Cilic win the 1 year, Del Potro win the other year. I mean, there we didn't have Nadal, we didn't have Federer, we didn't have Djokovic playing, so nobody says anything then. Okay. But now all of a sudden it's an issue. Okay, yeah. So, you know, the players were chosen. Simona Halep decided not to play. Andreescu decided to take off the year. Roger Federer doesn't. And you must remember, the US Open is always the last Grand Slam normally of the year. Yeah. And by the US Open, a lot of the players are tired and they're injured, and it is a risky Grand Slam for the organizers. The Australian Open always gets the big chunk of the best of the best. Wimbledon will always be a player dream tournament to play. The French Open's just before that, so they get something. But then you get to September, it's not easy. Your body's taking a hammering, and that hard court swing, which starts in Montreal, goes to Cincinnati, goes down to Washington, it goes to, you know, it's a tough swing. So I think that Dominic Thiem, we all knew that Dominic Thiem was about to win a Grand Slam. He's been in a couple of finals. He's been knocking at the door, and credit to him for winning that final against Zverev. I mean, it wasn't going to be an easy final. Both him and Zverev basically are the new era that we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the first player in Open era history to come back from 2 sets down in a US Open final to win the title. It was an amazing final, you know, 2-6, 4-6, 6-4, 6-3, and then of course that famous final set 7-6. I mean, it was an incredible match. It was brilliant for the promoters, brilliant for TV, brilliant for everybody. And I think that it's just taken Dominic Thiem to a new level. So he now deserves that title. He's been, it was his 4th appearance in a Grand Slam final, and now he cracked the nod. He's one of the elite few, and I think he's going to be a new person. So Rev, on the other hand, will obviously kick himself for being 2 sets up and going down, but he can be very proud of himself to getting a Grand Slam final. And he's, you know, if you take it in a stage, Dominic Thiem now is an A+, and Zverev is an A. So he's got to just do that little bit more to get the A+, and then he's in the league of the Federers, the Nadals, whatever. Yeah. But he's certainly up there, and I think it's going to happen. But I think given to him, and then of course Osaka, you know, winning the women's singles, defeating a very informed Victoria Azarenka, also coming from a set down. She's won it before. She's won the Australian Open. It's her 3rd Grand Slam, deserved winner. And yeah, I think one must just forget about the people that weren't there. We've got plenty of tournaments where people aren't there. We're talking about the French Open taking place right now. Roger Federer isn't in the draw, and nobody's saying a thing. Everything's focused on Nadal and Djokovic.
Bruce, a couple of other talking points out of the US Open this year. Obviously, we can talk about the opening rounds. Saw Pliskova out, saw Venus Williams out. Great to see Kim Clijsters back, following a 7-year retirement, but ultimately being bundled out very, very early on. But I suppose the biggest talking point of this year's US Open, viruses aside, has got to be Djokovic and that DQ for the ball in the throat.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the most bizarre circumstances in the history of tennis, I think. I mean, it was so funny. We were having load shedding of all things here at my home. And I was on the phone to Jeff Coetzee, who was sitting in the stadium having a bite to eat. And as he was talking to me, he kept on saying, Djokovic is in trouble. Something's going to explode. And he predicted it. And true's nuts, when it happened, I wasn't watching TV. I was listening to him, and he was going through it word by word. And I could hear everything because he was so close to the chair umpire and what was going on with the supervisors. And it was absolutely bizarre how it unfolded. But it does teach you a couple of things. First of all, Djokovic was bound. This was bound to happen. He had been behaving in practice, Jeff said, not well. He's been hitting balls around the court for far too long. He's got away with it because of his name and because of his ranking. And this was bound to happen. And had he missed that woman, right, he probably would have been okay.
Yeah.
It would have been one of the normal things, but he didn't aim at her. He was upset. He turned himself around and flicked the ball against the back fence and hit her in the throat. I mean, she's fine. She got a fright. She collapsed. Normal people would do that because that's the way it is. You don't expect it. But the rules are very clear. You do not hit a ball around, and if it hits a spectator or any official, you get defaulted. And that was it, straight away, regardless of who you were, regardless of what you are. And it was a big blow to the tournament and a big, big blow to Djokovic because he's going to maybe miss records because of one Grand Slam, and he's going to probably, unless he's got a really hard and sharp mind and a strong mind, he hopes he doesn't relive this one when he's going through the motions in Roland Garros and next year's Grand Slams. But what a bizarre circumstances, and it actually opened up the tournament.
Yeah.
And it really gave Dominic Thiem that green light because without a doubt, Djokovic went into that tournament as the informed man. He had just won that Cincinnati Masters title on the same court the week before. He was in sublime form, and he was no doubt the favorite to win that tournament. So, yeah, Dominic Thiem, good luck, good effort there to capitalize on that. And but wow, it was a talking point, and it was a talking point not only amongst us tennis lovers, but amongst the everyday people around the world because it was just so bizarre.
Bruce, coming back to one of the topics I raised at the beginning, the spectatorless US Open, and as a result, lots of revenue loss for the organizers, and not just revenue loss from sponsors, because I'm led to believe that that official sponsors, all of them stayed on, but they were offered their contracted fee. I think it was only 30 or 40% of their contracted fee. That's all they had to pay. And the official suppliers ended up paying far less than 50% of their contracted fees to be on site and obviously get, let's call it screen time, because obviously there were no crowds. And particularly when it came to official suppliers like Coca-Cola and the wine companies, etc., they weren't going to be sort of getting their product into consumers' hands. So massive, massive sort of lost opportunities for them. And then looking at the TV ratings, looking at some reports coming out that only some 700,000 people viewed the US Open on the ESPN family sort of channels. And that's like 45% down from last year, where, you know, there was something like almost 1.3 million people watching. So huge losses on the financial front, but all in all, the organizers calling it a very successful tournament.
Yeah, I think you must understand, Mark, if I had to tell you how much money these Grand Slams make, a loss like this is nothing to them. Their profits every year run in the millions and millions and millions. And that's why I always get so annoyed that the US, especially Great Britain, France is not too bad, Australia is picking up. They're just not producing good players anymore. The US has been through a drought of top players since Andy Roddick retired, and John Isner's been holding the flag, and Serena Williams is soon not going to be there. And it's, Kenin is a new, but they've got enough money to produce the best players in the world. And it's because the profits of the USTA are so big from this tournament. So the figures are not good, But you must remember that with the profits made in one Grand Slam, they can run 4 more.
Wow.
and,
Wow.
and break and break even. So that shows you the amount. So don't worry about the profits. They got less television money. Remember, they paid big rights for that.
Yeah.
So ESPN are the losers, not the US Open. And that's why there was a cut all around, because they knew that they weren't going to make the profit. But they still did okay. And they still broke even, and they still got all the profits from last year that can carry them through to 2024. And remember also that there was an $800,000 cut in the prize money for the players.
Yes,
as well. But that winning check is over $3 million. I mean, please, it's, at the end of the day, and remember, no parents' money is paid to any players at a Grand Slam where other tournaments get appearance. Rafael Nadal gets $1.8 million at any tournament before he hits the ball on a court. So he doesn't get that in the Grand Slam. So they were okay. And the sponsors stuck by them. And the agreement was, just so that you know, that they would extend their sponsorship by an extra year if they stayed in. And to get an extra year on sponsorship is huge. Okay? It's huge because the negotiations are tough, and normally the prices in the year of you renewing almost double.
Yeah. Okay, so now that makes a heck of a lot more sense, because I just looking at the report, something just didn't make sense as to why they were talking about sponsorship, 2-year sponsorship cycles, etc. And I'm just going, no, but 1 + 1 year is not equaling 3, and now that all makes sense. Bruce, quick last comments from you. French Open currently underway. I'm pretty sure there was a lot of discussions taking place between the management team at the US Open and the French Open management team, just in terms of the learnings around the testing protocols and the bubble environment. How, at this stage of the French Open, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about wrapping up the French Open once it's done, but at this stage of the French Open, has it been a better build up to a Grand Slam, viruses aside?
No, it's been actually very difficult. The reason being is that we're playing in a very unusual time of year compared to normal. Normally play it in May, which is the spring period and a warm period in Paris. And now we're going into an autumn cold period, and they've had an early winter start. It's been very chilly. Reports coming in from Roland Garros are saying that it's been raining. There has been scheduling changes. It's been cold. There's a brand new stadium. It's got a roof. Rafael Nadal is not happy because he likes it to be dry, the ball bouncing high. He likes the clay to be more harder. It's more softer. They've changed the ball to the Wilson from the Babolet ball to make it slower. It's not easy for the players. But Stefan de Kock, the coach of Raven Klaasen, told me just before I joined you, because I wanted to just get a feedback from him. He said that it's the same for every player, but he said it's very difficult. And if you I actually watched a match 1 or 2 nights ago, Zarev, or was it yesterday? They were playing with long sleeves. And, they were, in 2-hour matches, and, they were playing with long tights. It's cold. It's not comfortable. The other thing is, originally the French were going to have 15,000 spectators in, then they dropped it to 5,000. Now it's only 1,000. Very vocal people. They get very involved in the matches. It's not happening. And so the vibe is just like the US Open, where there is no spectators. Apparently the bubble is almost as good, if not better, Jeff Kutsia was telling me, than the US Open. He said that there was a big contingent of French officials at the US Open looking at how it was done so that they didn't make any mistakes. And the worst is that the players were all worried about is that France has gone into another spike.
Yeah.
In Paris in particular, 6,300 a day. That's more than actually when they were at their peak. So there has been a very, very big concern about it. And and Jeff just did say to me that the testing is absolutely painful. They're testing every single day, and they've managed to do a system where they get a test back in an hour. So what happens is you get tested every day you get tested, and they leave it to you, and then you get through an app, you get your results. So that wasn't at the US Open. It was random testing after after the first initial testing, and they relied on the US government to allow you into the country as being tested negative. That's why the French disqualification was so bizarre, because the French have to test before, like South Africa, they leave Paris, and when they get to New York, they're tested. We can't understand how that happened, and that's why the players were a little bit upset that the disqualification did take place, as well as all those coaches, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I think just tournament organizers didn't want to take a chance. So it's going well in Paris. I'm speaking to the boys. But it is very different. We've got different weather. We've got for the first time roof over the center court. It hasn't been before. We've got slow clay. We've got thick air. We've got different balls. Never Wilson has never been played in the French Open. It's always been either Babla or Dunlop. So that makes a very big difference. Very big difference. And it's not going to be easy for someone like Rafael Nadal to win this year. In fact, I don't even think he's a favorite.
Wow, Bruce, lots for us to talk about when we wrap up the French Open in just a couple of weeks' time. Thank you so much for your time. Bruce Davidson from the BLD Group. Cannot wait to get some more insights from you regarding the French Open. Once again, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.